You know what's wild? We watch movies to escape reality, right? To see heroes cheat death, to watch impossible stunts, to believe that people can survive anything as long as the script says they should. But sometimes the line between cinema and reality doesn't just blur, it completely shatters. And what I'm about to tell you isn't special effects. There's no director yelling cut, no safety coordinator rushing in, no take two. These are the stories of actors and actresses who quite literally gave their final performance. And I'm not talking about their last movie before retirement. I'm talking about people who died with the camera still rolling. Now, before we dive into this, I need you to do something for me. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we're on a mission to hit 10,000 subscribers. And honestly, we're creating content that actually respects your intelligence. No fluff, no clickbait garbage, just real stories told the way they deserve to be told. And if you've been here before, you already know we don't hold back. Because here's the thing, Hollywood sells us immortality. They sell us the idea that stars are somehow above the rest of us, that they exist in this protected bubble of fame and fortune. But death doesn't care about your box office numbers. It doesn't care if you're the son of a legend or if you've got 3 movies lined up. When it's your time, it's your time. And for some of these people, that time came when they were doing exactly what they loved. So let's talk about the final method, the ultimate commitment to the craft, the performances that truly were to die for. Brandon Lee, born in 1965, dead by 93, 28 years old. Think about that for a second, 28. Some of you watching this right now are older than Brandon Lee ever got to be. Now, if you know anything about martial arts cinema, you know the name Bruce Lee, the legend, the icon, the man who kicked down doors in Hollywood and made the world pay attention to martial arts. And Brandon was his son. Can you imagine that pressure? Your dad is literally a global icon who also died young and mysteriously. There were already whispers of a family curse. Superstitious nonsense, right? Brandon was finally getting his shot. The movie was called The Crow, dark, gothic, perfect for the 90s. He was going to be a star. You could see it in the footage. The guy had presence, had his father's intensity, but with his own style. March 31st, 1993. They're filming a scene where Brandon's character gets shot. Simple enough. They'd done this a million times in movies. Prop gun, blank round, movie magic. Except someone messed up. Somewhere along the line, a real bullet fragment got lodged in that prop gun. When they fired it at Brandon, that fragment came out with the force of an actual bullet. He was shot for real, on a movie set, playing a character who gets shot. The footage exists somewhere, locked away, never to be released. They rushed him to the hospital, operated for 5 hours, but the damage was too severe. He was pronounced dead at 1:13 p.m. The movie was almost finished. They had to make a choice, shut it down as a tragedy or finish it as a tribute. They chose tribute. Using early CGI, body doubles, and careful editing, they'd completed The Crow. And you know what? It became a cult classic. Brandon Lee's face is on posters in college dorms to this day. But here's the gut punch. He never got to see it. He never got to see himself become the star he was destined to be. And people still ask, who was watching the prop master? How does a real bullet end up in a prop gun? The investigation found negligence, corner cutting, and a series of small mistakes that added up to one fatal consequence. Classic Hollywood, really. Save a few bucks, rush the schedule. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. But if you think that's dark, let me tell you about Vic Morrow. This one's so horrific, it changed how movies are made forever. 1982. They're making Twilight Zone the movie, trying to recapture that classic television magic for the big screen. Vic Morrow was a solid actor, been around forever, knew what he was doing. The scene they're filming takes place in Vietnam. There's a helicopter, explosions, chaos, typical war scene stuff. Except they were filming this at 2:30 in the morning, in the dark, with a helicopter flying way too low, with explosions going off that nobody had properly coordinated, and worse, they had hired 2 child actors illegally under the table to avoid child labor laws. The helicopter was right above them, 25 feet up maybe. The explosions went off, the helicopter lost control, and in front of a rolling camera, the helicopter's rotor blades decapitated Vic Morrow and one of the children. The other child was crushed. 3 people, dead, on a movie set, because someone thought getting the shot was more important than safety regulations. The director, John Landis, he of Animal House and Blues Brothers, went to trial. Involuntary manslaughter charges, and he was acquitted, walked away. Sure, his reputation took a hit, but he kept making movies. Meanwhile, Vic Morrow and those 2 kids, 7-year-old Micah Din Lee and 6-year-old Renee Shin Yi Chen, they don't get to walk anywhere. This tragedy actually did change things, though. Helicopter safety regulations on sets became ironclad. Child labor law enforcement got serious. Sometimes it takes the worst possible outcome for people to start caring about the rules. Now let's talk about someone you definitely know, Heath Ledger. And yeah, technically he didn't die on set, but he died in the middle of filming, and the circumstances around his death are so tied to his work that we need to talk about it. Heath Ledger was the real deal. This wasn't some pretty face who lucked into fame. This was a guy who could disappear into a role. You watch him in Brokeback Mountain, then you watch him as the Joker in The Dark Knight, and you're looking at 2 completely different human beings. That's not acting, that's transformation. When he died in January 2008, he was in the middle of filming The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus with Terry Gilliam directing. And Gilliam, if you don't know, is the guy who made Brazil and was part of Monty Python. He's brilliant, but his productions are cursed. Seriously, look it up. The man cannot catch a break. Heath was found dead in his New York apartment. Accidental overdose of prescription medications, sleeping pills, anxiety medication, painkillers. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. But the internet, the internet, had theories. People said he got too deep into the Joker role, that playing a psychopath broke something in his mind, that he couldn't come back from that darkness. Here's the truth. We don't know. We don't know if the Joker role contributed to his mental state. We don't know if he was struggling with demons we never saw. What we do know is that he was 28 years old, the same age as Brandon Lee, and he left behind a daughter who had to grow up without his father. But the movie, what do you do when your lead actor dies halfway through filming? Terry Gilliam could have scrapped it, taken the insurance money, called it a tragedy, and moved on. Instead, he did something genius. Heath's character in the film travels through a magical mirror and transforms. So Gilliam cast Johnny Depp, Jude Law, and Carl Farrell to each play transformed versions of Heath's character. 3 of the biggest actors in the world stepped up, donated their salaries to Heath's daughter, and helped finish the film as a tribute. And it worked. The movie's not Gilliam's best, but it's a beautiful, haunting goodbye to an actor who left us way too soon. The Dark Knight came out later that year. Heath won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor posthumously. His family accepted it on his behalf. The entire audience stood up. And somewhere in all of that applause was the collective grief of millions of people who realized we'd lost something special. Speaking of irony so thick you could choke on it, let's talk about Paul Walker. Here's a guy who became world famous for a franchise about cars, speed, and cheating death through impossible stunts. Fast and Furious was his bread and butter. He wasn't the most acclaimed actor in Hollywood, but he was beloved. By all accounts, genuinely good dude. Charity work, loved cars in real life, no scandal, no drama. November 2013, He's in the middle of filming Fast and Furious 7, takes a break from the production to attend a charity event for his organization, Reach Out Worldwide. He's with his friend Roger Rodas, a professional race car driver. They leave the event in a Porsche Carrera GT. The car crashes into a concrete lamppost and two trees, bursts into flames. Both of them die instantly. Speed was a factor. The investigation found they were going somewhere between 80 and 93 miles per hour in a 45 zone. The man who made a career out of fast cars died in a fast car. If a screenwriter pitched that, you'd call it heavy-handed. You'd say it's too on the nose, too lazy. But reality doesn't care about subtlety. Universal Studios had a massive problem. Their star stud was dead, and they were in the middle of a movie that was going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. What do?
They shut down production for months. They rewrote the script. They used Paul's brothers, Caleb and Cody, as body doubles. They used CGI to put Paul's face on his brothers' bodies. And then they made the ending a tribute. If you've seen it, you know. That final scene where Dom and Brian drive side by side once last time, before Brian's car turns off onto another road. See you again playing over the montage. Say what you will about the Fast and Furious movies, but that ending was earned. That was real emotion. Vin Diesel gave the eulogy at Paul's funeral, cried while talking about his brother. And yeah, maybe some of it was Hollywood emotion, performance emotion, but I believe it was real. Sometimes the family you make on set becomes as real as blood family. John Ritter. Now here's one that messed me up when I first heard about it. John Ritter. If you're old enough, you know him from Three's Company. If you're younger, you might know him from 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. September 2003. They're rehearsing on set. John suddenly starts feeling sick. He's sweating, nauseous, dizzy. They call a paramedic. Here's the horrible part. Everyone thought he was joking around at first. John Ritter was known for physical comedy, for pratfalls, for making faces and acting sick for a laugh. So when he actually collapsed, there was this moment of confusion. Is this a bit? Is John doing a thing? But no, this was an aortic dissection, which is basically when your aorta, the main artery from your heart, tears. It's catastrophic. It's almost always fatal. They rushed him to the hospital. His daughter, actress Amy Yazbek, raced to be there. He died that same day. 54 years old. Just gone. And the show tried to continue. They wrote his death into the storyline, had episodes dealing with the family's grief, but you could feel it. You could feel the real sadness seeping through the scripted sadness. The show lasted one more season and then quietly ended. Here's what gets me about John Ritter's death. He died doing what he loved, surrounded by people who cared about him, making people laugh. If you've got to go, that's not the worst way. But man, 54 is too young. Steve Irwin. All right, let's talk about the crocodile hunter. Steve Irwin, the most Australian man who ever lived. The guy who taught a generation of kids that wildlife is amazing and should be respected, not feared. Steve Irwin was legitimately fearless. He'd wrestle crocodiles, handle the most venomous snakes on Earth, get up close with animals that could kill him in seconds. And he did it all with this infectious enthusiasm. Crikey became part of the global vocabulary because of this man. September 4th, 2006, they're filming a documentary called Ocean's Deadliest in the Great Barrier Reef. They're following stingrays, which are generally pretty docile animals, not aggressive, not known for attacking people. Steve swims over a stingray. The stingray, probably feeling threatened, does what stingrays do. It whips its tail up. The barb, which is poisonous and sharp, goes directly into Steve's chest, directly into his heart. The camera was rolling. The footage exists. His cameraman captured the whole thing, and true to form, Steve pulled the barb out himself, which medically was the worst thing he could have done. It caused him to bleed out faster. They rushed him to the boat, tried to resuscitate him, but when a stingray barb punctures your heart, there's not much to be done. He was pronounced dead a few hours later. The footage has never been released. Steve's wife, Terry, made sure of it. She said Steve would have wanted it destroyed, and honestly, that's probably the right call. Some things don't need to be public. The world mourned. Australia mourned like they'd lost a national treasure, which they had. His kids, Bendy and Robert, were just little when it happened. They've grown up continuing his legacy, doing conservation work, keeping his memory alive. But here's the thing about Steve Irwin. He knew the risks. He'd been bitten, scratched, poisoned, attacked countless times. He knew that one day his luck might run out. But he did it anyway because he believed in what he was doing. That's not stupidity. That's commitment. Tyrone Power. Let's rewind to old Hollywood for a minute. Tyrone Power, if you don't know the name, your grandparents definitely do. This guy was a matinee idol, a sword-buckling leading man, the kind of movie star they don't really make anymore. November 1958, he's in Spain filming Solomon and Sheba, big-budget biblical epic, the kind of movie Hollywood was cranking out back then. He's filming an intense sword-fighting scene, lots of physical exertion, lots of takes, lots of performance. In the middle of the scene, he starts having a heart attack. Massive one. He collapses right there on set, sword in hand, in full costume. They rushed him to the hospital, but they died before they could save him. He was 44 years old. The production had a problem. They'd already filmed a ton of material with Tyrone in the lead role, but without their star, they couldn't finish the movie. So they made the brutal decision to reshoot everything with Yul Brynner instead. Imagine being Yul Brynner in that situation. You're stepping into a dead man's shoes, literally, performing scenes that someone else had performed weeks earlier before dying. That's gotta mess with your head. The movie came out in 1959. It was dedicated to Tyrone Power's memory. By all accounts, it wasn't very good. That's Hollywood. Sometimes the show must go on, even when it probably shouldn't. Look, I could keep going. There are more stories. Roy Kinnear, who fell from a horse during a Three Musketeers sequel and bled to death before getting proper medical care. Martha Mansfield, a silent film actress whose costume caught fire from a cigarette and burned her alive on set. Red Fox, the comedian who collapsed during a sitcom and everyone thought it was part of his act. Tommy Cooper, the British comedian who literally died on live television while the audience laughed, thinking it was part of the show. John Eric Hexum, who was goofing around with a prop gun loaded with blanks, put it to his head as a joke, pulled the trigger, and the blank's concussive force drove a piece of his skull into his brain, killing him. Each of these stories is a reminder that movies are made by real people who can really die, that the magic we see on screen comes at a cost sometimes, that Hollywood's glamour can't protect you from accidents, from illness, from the fundamental fragility of being human. These actors and actresses, they gave everything to their craft, and in these cases, everything wasn't a metaphor. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Appreciate the art, but remember the human cost. Enjoy the movies, but demand better protections for the people making them. Be entertained, but don't be complicit in a system that values the shot more than the person behind the camera or in front of it. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you see a particularly dangerous or impressive stunt in a film, take a second to appreciate that someone risked their actual life to give you that moment of entertainment. That's not nothing. That's everything. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Thank you for caring enough about these stories to hear them told properly. Hit that like button if this video meant something to you. Subscribe if you want more content that treats these topics with the respect they deserve. We're trying to build something real here, something that doesn't just chase views but actually adds something meaningful to the conversation. Drop a comment and let me know, were there any of these stories you'd never heard of before? Are there other actors or crew members who died on set that you think deserve to be remembered? Let's keep the conversation going. Because remembering isn't morbid. Remembering is how we honor the dead, and remembering is how we protect the living. The show must go on, sure, but not at any cost. Never at any cost. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.